for joining us, the 11th annual. We're really excited to be back in person this year. Yes, I know. So excited to see all of your faces in person. But we'll also learn some tips and tricks for the remote environment. So that's what we'll be talking about today. But wanted to thank our sponsors that made this possible. Part of the People track, we are sponsored by the Commons on Champa, one of the 8 programming tracks that are sponsored Denver Startup Week and the entire entrepreneurial, that's a hard word to say, team. But by attending this session, you agree to the code of conduct as well as being photographed and recorded. We've got a camera in the back if you want to wave to it. But be sure to share your experiences. There's a hashtag for all your social media accounts. That's hashtag Den Startup Week. And we are from Evolve, so we'll introduce ourselves in a bit and tell you a little bit about us. Yeah. Wanted to, of course, thank our sponsors. Of course, we shared ours is sponsored by the Commons on Champa. Here's a few of the other sponsors that are putting on Denver Startup Week. Big thank you to them and for all of you for being here. A few more of the sponsors, too.
More sponsors.
Awesome. As Tyrese introed, our session is called Start Right, Stay Right. So really focused on setting employees up for success in a remote environment. I'm really excited to engage in a workshop with all of you. Hopefully we're keeping it pretty interactive, have a lot of questions for you. But my name is Caitlin Griffin. I have been at Evolve for 6 years and have had the majority of time spent in the learning space. So really excited to be here to speak to you about onboarding new hires. That's where I spent a lot of my time, really focused on the new hire experience, and now have moved into an inclusion space. So really focused on making sure that after we bring people on, we can make sure that we're supporting them throughout their experience with our team.
Yeah, and I am Tyrese Harris. I just joined Evolve in June of 2022, but have been in the sort of learning onboarding space for about 13 or 14 years at different companies at different levels. So I've seen things start from the ground up and go to scale and experience remote versus in-person onboarding, and had to go through onboarding at Evolve most recently. So really excited to get to connect with all of you today. And talk about our experiences as well as be able to give you some actionable things to think about in your organizations as well.
Awesome. Yeah. We've got a few questions to get us started, but a little bit more about why we're up here talking to you. We have seen a lot of growth over the last couple of years. We started about 11 years ago as a company, and we have just hit our 1,000 employee mark. And about, I think, over 75% of that has happened within the last 2 years, all remotely. So brought on a lot of teammates, made a lot of adjustments to our onboarding program to make sure it's an inclusive one, an engaging one, and encourages success from the beginning. So a little bit about why we're here. I would say I think 60% of our teammates within the last 2 years have also been hired outside of Denver, so haven't even had the opportunity of bringing them in and meeting them in person. So it has been a lot of remote, a lot of hybrid, both worlds, but really excited to get to know kind of a little bit about where you are in your journey and workshop some ideas with you today.
Yeah. We're going to do a little bit of interactive polling. You can text in answers. So if you'd like to get your session started and you have your phone, you can text my first and last name, 136, so Tyrese Harris, 136 to the number 22333 to get started. We'll give you a second to open that up before we move along.
Yep. You just have to text that number one time, and then we'll ask a couple questions, and you can just text your answers to those, and it'll generate on the screen for us, so we can know a little bit about all of you.
Give me some thumbs up when you're ready.
Sound good?
Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up.
And please call me out if you can't hear us in the back. This doesn't actually amplify our voices. Also encourage people to join up front, too. Thank you. All right.
Okay.
Sounds good. Well, let's learn a little bit about where you all are in your journey when it comes to the company you work for and your onboarding experience. First up, we would love to know, what is the size of your company? I'm actually going to skip through these and get to our slide. What size is your company? How many people? Got a one-person company. Wow.
Yeah.
Getting started.
8,000.
1,000.
Growing.
This word cloud's interesting. I love that it puts it in within all the zeros.
So there's lots of 1,000. So the more responses we get of that answer, the bigger that number gets on the page.
Looks like we've got a couple one-person companies as well.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll talk through different needs for all of that because there's a lot to think about. And like I mentioned, we have about 1,000 people. When I started, we had 62. So I've seen it grown a lot. We used to do just 1 hour, got you started at your company, gave you your computer and said, here you go, got introduced to your teams, but have learned a lot along the way. So we'll talk through that. A couple more questions for you. Would love to know, based on your current onboarding process, how would you rate it? 5 being really satisfied. How'd you feel when you started at your company? Did you feel set up for success?
5 is like,
Okay. Got it. All good. We're trying new tools here too. This is a
2,000.
great way to try. Yeah.
5 is like great, awesome, wonderful, couldn't
Yes.
possibly be better.
We're excited.
And 1 is like, we're getting started, but it looks like we got some zeros, so you're like, we have nothing, or it's just that bad.
Awesome. Looks like some of us are still in the startup phase.
A good amount of 5s.
Yeah.
People are feeling good.
Some mediums. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to talk through some of those thoughts on what has made it a good experience and hopefully workshop some ways to improve it. Last question that might look a little goofy on a word cloud, but if there is some thoughts, some takeaways that you're hoping to get out of the session, would love to either verbally hear those from you or feel free to put them in the word cloud too, even if they're just one word. What are you hoping to get out of this session today?
Yeah.
I want to make sure we're tailoring it to your experience.
You can always yell out if you prefer.
Best
See,
practices.
Wow idea.
Wow. Insight.
Wow makes me feel pressure to be impressive. You want wow out of me. I don't know.
World, remote,
Yeah.
connection. All right. Insight looks like the big theme here.
Ideas.
Awesome. Well, we give you a little handout. If you don't have a pen, raise your hand. We've got some pens for you too, somewhere around here. But
I have them.
Okay, perfect. But would love for you to write some thoughts. We're going to ask you a lot of questions today. We hope that you verbally engage with us, but also use that sheet to share some of your takeaways. But again, want to kind of see where you are now and how we can keep going. But going back to when I asked the question, what is your current rating of your onboarding process? Ours has been pretty good over the last couple years. We've gotten some really good feedback from our teammates, but wanted to share a statistic with you from Gallup that only 12% of new hires across the board at all companies are satisfied with their onboarding experience. That leaves 88% of people, that's fast math, I know, 88% of people that are not satisfied, right? There's something missing. There's something missing from that. And it's your job. I'm assuming a lot of you are, responsible for some type of interaction with their new hires, whether that's in the recruiter aspect, the training aspect, or everything in between. You're responsible for figuring out what that is, right? What is the missing piece to make them more satisfied? So we're going to talk through that today.
Yeah.
All right, so group discussion, right? This is a workshop. We want to make it interactive with all of you. What are some of the challenges that you all have faced?
Who's going to be the brave first sharer? All right, Sam.
Yeah.
I guess just like knowing your teammates
Yeah.
well, like or the company as a whole. Like I onboarded not remotely, and it was like so great to come into the office and meet my entire office, the team, all that. So like on the remote side, just like not really getting that connection.
Yeah, so if you couldn't hear Sam, she said, not having the connection that you would normally have in the office and being able to meet people, and it was great when it was in person, but remotely that's a little bit more challenging, which we'd agree, I think. Mm-hmm. Anybody else? I cannot read your name that far, but.
It's a quick question. Who's this person? What does this thing stand for? Where's the at? Where's the attention? Like all these things that you just get an instant when you're in the office.
Yeah.
Remotely, translating that. But you throw a Slack out there to either maybe you're back in 30 minutes.
It is. It's hard. There's a lot more effort in figuring all that stuff out. I know. like I said, I've been in Evolve for almost 90 days, and we love our acronyms, and so there's a ton that we've invested in helping people understand and navigate that. So all of that who's who and what's what and what does that mean stuff, yeah.
And who's the person that's going to answer those questions for you, right? Who's
Yeah.
your contact? Definitely. Yeah, go ahead.
I think one thing that can be really tough is understanding company culture and norms. Right? Like when you're remote and you're out by yourself, and you can always ask a question, but you don't necessarily know like what's the standard for how we approach this meeting or how we approach this problem or solution, or there are just different behaviors and ways of working that can be really tough to pick up on.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Yes.
Standardizing. Because like we're a company that occasionally it feels like every new hire is different than the last new hire when it's like it is. So in person, that's super easy because everyone's sitting next to each other. You're like, this is your general team, and it's quick and questions, but then standardizing it for people when you can't pull in the team members for like 30 seconds.
Yeah, there's a lot more effort that goes into scheduling a meeting and all hopping on Zoom than being able to standardize organically and or let's hop together in a quick huddle.
Totally. Believe it or not, this is actually the first time Tyrese and I have met in person. So we've
is.
onboarded remotely and have been through all of this, all these challenges.
Yes, literally today.
Yes. Awesome. Next question for the group. What are some things that you do well currently when it
Yeah.
comes to onboarding? Share some tips and tricks.
There were 5s up there, so I know people are doing things well. Lauren.
Yeah, I think for us, we had a session yesterday that talked about mentorship, and I applied for a mentorship program at Udemy most recently, and we had a lab about it this morning, and a 6-week checkup on the mentorship program, and seeing so many new hires in that lab that we had, that is a really big piece of that. I joined Udemy 3 years ago, so it's very different today than it was.
Yeah.
It's gone from 500 to 2,000 almost. So I think that is something that they recognize as mentorship. It's a big part of keeping people here and making sure that they have money to go to with all these nuanced questions about culture and norms or where the bathroom is and to that point. So I think that's something that we're doing better
Yeah.
as we scale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Say we have a really structured onboarding process, so it's broken up by week and topic, and so you know exactly what you have to do any moment of any day. But a really cool piece of it is that different folks across the company from different teams facilitate different sections of it, and that rotates. Like the class that I went through would be different than the class that Connie went through or whoever led it. So you get a chance to meet other people, meet other teams, make connections in a remote setting with folks that you might not interact with on a daily basis.
Yeah. And that goes towards some of the stuff we talked about in like when you're in person, you make connections, but in a remote world, it's harder. So in integrating that, meet different people, bring different people into the onboarding is definitely something that cares for that. Anybody else have a great thing that they're doing that they want to share? No? All right.
Awesome. All right, so some more kind of statistics based on what you were saying and how important onboarding really is to your company. This is kind of on the bad side, right? So the people who are dissatisfied with their onboarding, or maybe they didn't even have an onboarding experience. Has anybody here ever been just kind of the only person to start at your company at a time and just kind of were given your laptop, maybe your email? Yeah?
I was like,
You've
yeah.
had that experience? Right? And you just feel kind of isolated, right? Feel a little bit alone. Right, so putting that focus on onboarding and all the interactions that we just talked about, right? So here's some stats and how important onboarding really is to your company. A lot of people say, okay, we got them to the door, right? Maybe we have these fun company perks, but not all of us have that opportunity, right? We're not all a Google. We can't all have this red tape where we give them all these cool things. So really focusing on their experience, right? Starting them right, setting them up for success. So as you can see, companies lose about 25% of their teammates within their first year if they're not focused on that onboarding experience, right? Or the poor onboarding experience or lack of. 20% of that turnover happens within those first 6 weeks. And little cost here for a higher level, senior level teammate, that cost can be pretty expensive, right? Replacing an executive costs around 213% of that salary. So onboarding, very, very important. And I think these are just a few stats to highlight that.
So if you ever find yourself trying to defend the need for enhancing or building or growing onboarding, like these are the things that you can look back on and say like, okay, this is really costing us in attrition, hiring, TA costs, all sorts of untangible things as well.
Yeah. There's so many teams that we'll talk about that are involved in this entire process, right? And getting someone in the door, being really intentional with that decision, it matters. And then here's some more stats on companies that have focused on that experience, right? So you'll see that 69% of employees are more likely to stay for 3 years. That's a long time that you get to invest in them and they're investing in you, right? So investing just in that initial onboarding experience, setting them up for success, giving them the tools that they need, making sure that they have that coaching along the way is really going to reward yourselves as a company. And again, 58% of that company is likely to stay, or 58% of that number is likely to stay for more than those 3 years. And more engaged, right? More engaged. You said that you were the only person to start. You were given a computer, probably not as engaged, right? You didn't have anybody to interact with.
And I was told to sit in a corner with the computer and watch training videos.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Not a fun experience, right? And I bet a lot of us have had that same experience before. All right. Curious, in your minds, when do you think the new hire experience starts?
Yeah. At the first
interview?
interview? Is that
Anyone
what you were
else?
going to say?
Well, I was going to say at the offer letter.
Offer letter?
Application.
Application?
Okay.
Marketing of the position.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got it. That's exactly where it starts, right? If you start at my company, your first impression is that job description.
Yep.
Right? So we're going to go through this roadmap, but it's going to be interactive. We're going to ask you questions at every point of the way, just getting you thinking of how can you influence the experience of your new hire, right? Even if they haven't started with you yet, you're still influencing their experience, their understanding of your company.
Yeah.
So it really does start with that job description. How are we marketing ourselves, right? What are we putting into that job description to attract the right people to our company?
What does it say about your company? Because that's like the first glimpse that somebody gets into what your company is, how you speak, the language you use, what you share about your culture and your values and how that role fits in. So like the minute you put a pencil to a piece of paper or a laptop, whatever you're using, to start to write a JD, that's when you're creating that onboarding experience for that person who ultimately gets the role.
All right, this is where your little worksheet will come into hand. Encourage you to take notes throughout as we work through this roadmap. But want to hear your own experiences. So starting with that job description, right? Marketing the position, marketing the company. As a candidate, let's think through their lens first. If you're applying for a job, right? Because that's what it's about. It's about their experience. How are we attracting the right type of candidate? So what are some things that might deter you from applying for a job that you see on a job, on like the rec that is provided to you? If you're looking at a job description, what might deter you? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Unicorn, guru.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even like aggressive salesperson, right? That deters some people. You said
Yeah.
family, is that one? Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of relates to all that, but just kind of like generic jargon that's like you see on repeated job postings or job descriptions.
Yeah. You feel like it's copy and paste, like it doesn't tell you anything about who they are as an organization.
Yeah.
Must be able to work in a fast-paced environment.
What's that keyword for?
Basically, you will never have downtime and it will always be stressful. What that translates to most people I know of, at least.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Oh, we can go back and then come forward.
Ooh,
yeah.
experience requirements, yes.
That's kind of what I was going to say. More explicit the requirements of work because nobody ever gets hired to the role.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What was yours?
No, I get turned off by jobs or postings that are awful.
A lot to read through.
Super long. Yeah.
No one has the attention span for that, right? Having to read through all of it. Yeah. Totally. Yeah, it's like I have to do all of that. Yeah. But 35 years experience for an entry level position, right? Or the degree requirement, right? Does that job actually require that? Is that inclusive? Or do I have the experience that will make me qualified for this job, right? Yeah, lots to think through. All right, what about on the employer side? So now you're hiring that candidate, okay? How are you creating a welcoming experience within your job posting? What are some ways that you're currently doing, or now thinking of the pain points or call outs from others in this room? What are some ways that we can fix that or change what our job description says to attract that candidate that we want?
Anybody have examples? Yeah. Uh-oh.
Someone's looking at job description to see that, they just want to get to know me first and then schedule an interview and just invite you to want to have that conversation with them. Because really, that's what an interview is getting to know the person.
Yeah.
Totally,
And everything else after that.
definitely.
I've noticed recently some employers say, please define, requirements.
Yeah. Because the requirements list is like, this is like my unicorn. This is like the thing that I would love to have. And there's a point where you're just unqualified, but there's a point where you're qualified enough. And I have started to see that language as well, where they're like, hey, if you meet most of these or you're not quite sure, go ahead and apply anyway. So yeah, that is a good one. Any other things that you've been doing or thinking of doing based on the feedback? Yeah.
I feel like in these sessions we've talked a lot about transparency in terms of pay, but just being transparent around other questions that they may have, like some of our roles open, we offer relocation packages, or what is hybrid work, i.e. like answering those top of mind questions that are eliminating barriers for people to maybe leave the careers page because they have a question on it and they just don't get back to it. My insurance is so short of a span, so as much as we can get answered in the job description to
Yeah.
eliminate barriers, decrease labels, so people are just feel like welcomed and applying. And then also having a resource for informational interviews was something that we talked in a session about yesterday. I thought that was really helpful, that they do have a quick question or they just want to learn more about the role before applying. Having someone's contact on the job description that they can get questions answered, I thought was very inclusive.
Yeah. 'Cause for the most part, unless you know somebody who works there already, the job description is all you have to make your decision about whether or not you want to apply. You don't have anybody to call and ask your question. So as best as you can, getting that information that covers the things that you think people might ask would be key.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So here's some of the takeaways that you all shared as well, but just some of the things to focus on. There's so many more as well, but some quick action that you can take right now, right, when you're looking through that job description, because knowing that that is your first impression, right? As a new hire at a company, my first time interacting with you was really reading through that job description. So are we using that inclusive language, right? Are you hiring? Are you listing where you're hiring? Is it a remote position? Can I work from every state, right? And then that qualifications, what's actually required, right? Or what's just a suggested one?
Yeah.
All right. That moves us to the application process, where some of you thought that that's kind of the first step where our experience with the new hire started. So back thinking through the lens of a new hire, right? Putting yourself in the candidate's shoes. What are some things that you would hope would be included? What do you like answering on an application? What might, and on the, sorry, go ahead. Let's answer that one first. Yeah.
Just an actual opportunity to demonstrate skills. Instead of just a list of, this is all places that I've worked over my entire lifetime. Give me an actual opportunity to actually send you something that would demonstrate I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Totally. Yep. Love that.
Anything else? Evelyn? Yeah.
Just we touched on this, yesterday, or they touched on it. Just honestly, it's the ease of the application process to start, because you get started, it's just so cumbersome.
Yeah.
Because you're, applying, it's just do it.
Like when they say upload your resume and then now fill in the
type it out.
profile and then
Yep.
now fill in your education and then
Yep.
now answer these questions and then now do this. Yeah.
Yeah, that deters people, right? So that's kind of the second part of this question is that would deter me, right? The length of I have to sit there. I'm like, do I have enough time to fill this out right now? And then it like times out on you while you're doing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
The actual full timeline of the application process, not just how long does it take to get involved for, but knowing is there 2, 3, 4 rounds.
Oh yeah, so like including what the interview process for the role would look like. Yeah, that's true. Because there are some roles where, like, I don't know. I just started Evolve, so I was interviewing, and there were places where I had like 10 interviews, and I'm like, okay, enough, decide now. So like, having a preview of what that would be like is probably key.
Yeah. And how quickly am I going to get a response, right? How quickly will I be notified one way or the other if you're moving forward with my resume or my application? So yes, definitely timing on that. And same thing here on the flip side. What are some things in your current application process that might prohibit, right? Might deter some of those potential candidates that you want to join in?
Yeah.
4 different interviews, all of them are panel interviews. And it can probably take a month before you hear back.
Yeah.
So it's very inefficient. You can pretty much figure out within 1 to 2 interviews max whether this person's the right fit.
Yep. How many people were in your company? Or are at your company? Thousands. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did 4 interviews. All of them were panel interviews, and it took them because their applicant tracking system, you would expect it to be a little bit better. I didn't get a response back in 2 months.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
And
I had already taken another job. And
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
And if you couple the entry level position with 32 years of experience with 7 interviews for entry level, like then you start to build up a just bad experience from the start. So like all of these are things that go into that onboarding before they even start day one.
Yeah. And you brought up a good point. I was actually going to ask this question on the next slide, but has anybody ever been in the application process or even the interview process and accepted another job because it was taking so long? Has that happened?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or lost a
Seems like
candidate
a
that
lot-
you were
or
trying to
lost a
hire
candidate.
because your process was too long.
It's not fun, right? Awesome. So some of the takeaways that you all pointed here too, right? The length and accessibility of that application, right? How long is it going to take me? Right? Do I have to upload a form and type in all the information? How quickly am I going to expect that response? How quickly am I going to expect to move through the entire process? And then I love what you said on here, right? Giving that candidate the opportunity to stand out. One thing I love about ours is that we ask, we've got a list of core values that we talk about all the time within our company, and they really, we want our teammates to embody them. They're really important to us. They set the foundation for how we move forward as a company. And one of the things we ask on our application is, which one stands out to you and why, right? Answering that question alone tells us a little bit more about you, and it's outside of just your experience. It's outside of, hey, I went to school here, or hey, I've worked at this company for this long. I get to know a little bit more about what's important to you as a person. All right, now we're at the interview, right? This is a huge opportunity to influence your new hires. Anybody ever had a poor interview experience?
And I know we talked a little bit about some of the like long ones, but like other examples.
It could be either.
Yeah.
Either.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
either way.
sorry, go ahead.
You can talk about it as a candidate, or you could talk about it as the hiring manager, or
I think probably the worst one I ever had was as the person being interviewed, was interviewed by one person who asked me questions for an hour. They got up and left. A different person came in and asked me the same questions for another hour. And then they asked me to come back 2 weeks later for them both to sit and talk with me at the same time for 2 hours. That was miserable.
And ask the same questions again.
Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah.
questions
Yeah.
again, yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else? Oh,
Yeah.
well, yeah. Yeah. So they added a cross-functional person in, but that person's kind of just there to like be the cross-functional person, and they don't really have any knowledge of the position or helpful insights. Well, you and then you.
100%. Like, I've had a similar experience where I applied for a job. It was early in my career, entry level. It was like a 6.5-hour day where I sat in a room and like one person would come in, and then 2 people came in, and then the next hour was one person, and it was just this. And there was a staffing specialist that would check in every once in a while, like bring me
Yeah.
It was brutal, and half the people I interviewed with were not even a part of the team.
Yeah.
Did you accept that job? Thank you for answering. Ooh.
We got on the call, they asked me to walk through my resume on LinkedIn, which is how they
Yeah.
reached out to me. They were like, this is not a good fit.
Yeah, that stinks. My sister's interviewing at places right now, and she was like, they called me and they had to have read my resume, and they spent most of the time asking me like why I would think I was qualified, and I'm like, yeah, but you brought me into the point of an interview, so yeah, that's like, did you read it or did you just pick me? Yeah.
All right.
Sometimes that can be a challenge, right? So I went through that interview process where the manager was like, look, you don't have the qualifications for the job. Why should I consider you? And that was my opportunity to make my sales pitch.
Yeah.
So, there's that test as well.
Yeah.
And yes, I did do it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Good.
All right. What about, one more question just on this is, and again, I think hopefully this discussion, we're getting takeaways, right, from what we do well, what we could do better at our own companies. Anybody have a good interview experience at your company or something, like at least even one part of it that stuck out to you, right, and made you want to join that company, that made you excited to join? Yeah.
Well, after having a bad experience with 4 interviews over a month, of course, with the company I'm with now, I had one interview, and they told me from the very beginning, they set the expectations of how hard the position was going to be, the role that was expected to play. They set all the expectations forward, and it was up to me to decide whether I wanted to move forward with them. And they said this would only be one interview. It was a one-panel interview, so everyone who needed to be there, which was my direct supervisor and his director, were on the call. They made a decision, and they told me I would find out later that week, and I got a call that same day.
Yeah.
Really setting that expectation, saying this is a one-and-done interview. I actually had to change around my schedule at my current job to make that interview work, and I only had to do it once rather than 4 different times over the course of the month and reintroduce myself. So,
Yeah.
efficient, just doing one interview and figuring it out.
Yeah.
Great.
Anybody else have something that they felt like either they do or they've experienced that was like uniquely great?
In my previous role, I would set the first 2 meetings for either group team for 30 minutes because usually you know very quickly from either a candidate standpoint or a hiring manager standpoint if it's going to be a good fit.
Mm-hmm.
And equally, we only have one opportunity for progression, so that way it's respectful of time on both sides.
Yeah.
So if immediately it was not a good fit, it was only 15 minutes that had been scheduled, and nobody had committed to traveling an hour.
Uh-huh.
The reason I started doing that is because like you get on an hour block and you know within 15 minutes I will never lose this person over.
Yeah.
Then why are we sitting here in front of them?
Yeah. And then on the flip side, like as a hiring manager, like, well, this interview is scheduled for an hour, and if I end it in 15 minutes,
Yeah.
they're going to clearly know they didn't do well, so now I've got to stretch it. So, yeah, I think scheduling it shorter to start with and then progressively getting more time is probably a good idea. Somebody else, okay.
I was going to share that I had the opportunity to engage with cross-functional partners, but in between every step, the hiring manager touched base with the team, sort of intro the individual that I was going to be spending time with, give me a little background about their role, who they are as a person, and then give me a little preview of what the conversation would be about. So I
Yeah.
felt very confident and prepared going into each conversation.
Yeah.
Preparation, right? That's the minimal thing that we can do. Love it. Great answers. And here's a lot that you all shared, right? Response time in between those interviews. How quickly am I going to hear back, right? Am I prepared for it? Is the hiring team, right? If I'm asking a question and maybe I ask multiple people that I'm interviewing with that question, is it consistent?
Yeah.
Am I getting the same answer back, right? And then a consistent experience for all candidates, right? Thinking through that inclusive mindset. Am I asking the same questions to each of my candidates? Am I measuring them all fairly, right? Making sure that it's the same experience for all.
Did you put your interview team together before you started the interview process, or are they going to hit a wall because you now have to figure out the next person in the process, or are you able to say, like, here's the process end to end, here's what it'll be if you move forward, here's where you'll hear back from us, and then make sure you stick to those and don't say, you'll hear back by the end of the week, and end of the week comes and goes and they don't hear anything. Yeah.
I just remember a great experience that I just had recently where they emailed me most of the questions that were going to be asked.
Yeah, so providing context of who you'll be meeting with, what their role is, and what they're going to ask you about. That's another good one. Yeah.
All right. Now we're here, right? We've hired the best candidate we could find, most qualified person for this role. Curious for this group, how far in advance have we accepted a job? What's the longest amount of time we've accepted a job before we've actually started at a job? Anybody have a specific length that comes to mind?
Yeah.
2.5 months?
months.
It's a long time,
Wow.
right?
Okay.
Yeah. Anybody have a similar length or mostly
Yes.
a couple weeks,
I see head nods.
2 weeks?
Yeah.
All right. That changes your experience though, right? It definitely depends on the time frame for sure. But curious right now, if any of you are hiring managers, how do you keep your new hires engaged? If it's 2.5 months or 2 weeks, how are you staying connected with people?
Did they engage with you during the 2.5 months?
Go ahead.
No.
Give you a direct point of contact immediately following it. Interview process, segue having people right
Yep. Direct point of contact, right? Knowing who I can ask my questions to, right? Not just signing an offer letter and then saying, oh, I hope I'm actually starting at this company, right? Communication.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh.
Nice. Yeah. Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I remember before I started at my company, I also got invited to a team event, which was so fun, right? A great way to just like feel connected already to the team. Does anybody send out like swag boxes? Yeah, lots of
Yeah.
swag. Has anybody not received swag and just received a computer? If that. Yeah?
Yeah.
How'd that make you feel?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Right? And even if if your company doesn't have the money to send out a bunch of swag, right? A handwritten letter or something to welcome a new hire, right?
Yeah.
Just putting that personal touch. Definitely.
'Cause
An
there's,
email.
like- oh,
sorry.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we send out the swag. We've also had some of our leadership team bring books.
Mm.
We have them either sign it or just send them a book. And then I think to your point, like having them invited to team offsites. I support hiring for our enterprise sales team. And those leaders are traveling all the time. So inviting them to be a part of dinners and potential customers that they'll have when they get onboarded has been really nice. And then we also have a template for the first day on LinkedIn. Post a picture and the things that we really like about them to welcome them to
Yeah.
the community and their social network presence.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And that's a huge way. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to add to that too, is that in some teams at our company will hire a manager will be like, hey, this company send out to their team and be like, here's their LinkedIn message. So there's been like when I joined my whole team, like reached out to me prior to me starting.
Yeah.
We're looking forward to having you on the team. I'm super excited. So I think like that's such a small thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most people are excited when they get a job offer and they accept it. So like really you just gotta like grab onto the excitement and not let it like drop. Like if you can just keep it and maintain it until they get to that day one by doing a lot of those things. So having people reach out to them, keeping them engaged, not losing sight of them, making sure you stay in contact, having different people reach out,
Yep.
inviting them possibly to team events, like you maintain the level and don't let it dip.
Yep. And the team events, right? I think you mentioned that you did a virtual one, which is huge, right? Because that's what we're in a remote world. That's not going away. Even if you do have an office, right? You might have some people come into the office, but we're going to be at least in a hybrid world. So those little points of touching, right? You sharing that you're excited to start a new role. Me adding you on LinkedIn shows that I'm excited you're coming, right? And sending you a quick note like, welcome to the team. That's a huge, it's so simple, but it makes such a huge impact.
I got the most people reach out to me before I started a job when I started at Evolve that I've ever had. And I was like, oh, this is great. Everybody's reaching out.
Yeah.
They're so happy. So yeah, it felt good.
Anything else? Okay. Engagement, right? Huge part. And then we kind of talked about this too, but setting them up for success, right? Having that point of contact so they know exactly who to ask a question to. For the past few years, I've been sending at least an email to recognize myself as their point of contact, right? So just making that connection, so simple. Especially when we've had classes that we've had 2 people start in a new hire class, and we've had 40 people start in a new hire class. So just reaching out to them, connecting to them, and introducing them to everybody else starting in their class too.
Yeah.
Utilize the tools that you have access to. So again, a lot of things that you all pointed out, right? That clear information, telling them what's their schedule for their training period or their first few days, right? Setting them up for success for that. Anticipating their needs, right? Sending them their welcome packages. And then, of course, that expectation setting. All right. The excitement doesn't stop there, right? Now they're here. They are coming to your company. It is their first day. This is where you actually make your full impact, right? You did it along the way, but now you're going to be with them. You're investing your time. So, what'd you think about your first day at your company? Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I think something that was very helpful was being that we're in a remote world, remote hybrid, having the team members reach out and schedule some time to connect one-on-one. That way you get to know all your team members. You're not kind of just learning about them and finally connecting with someone maybe 2 or 3 months down the line because they're really busy. So that's something, an experience I had with my first month. I had one-on-ones with every single person on my team, but we spoke for 30 minutes and just connect with one another and ask about certain things that we were struggling with, needed help with, and being able to do that just makes them feel welcome, kind of like them reaching out to you before your first day. So,
Yeah.
Were those sessions scheduled before you started, or did you kind of have to wait for them to be scheduled?
I had to wait for them to be scheduled
Okay.
after my first day.
Okay. Sometimes it's fun for you to be able to schedule them, but also like having a plan, right? An onboarding plan saying, hey, here's the important people you should meet with, right? Here's some important tools and resources for you. Just putting that in a Google Doc or whatever systems that you will use, right? That way you feel organized. I know as a new hire exactly where I'm supposed to be. I can look at my calendar, and if it's blank, what am I supposed to do, right? So
What
just
time do
having
I
some
log
things.
on? How do
Yeah.
I log on? What do I do if I have computer issues and I'm remote and I can't walk over to the IT desk?
Yeah.
Like all of those things. Anybody else have a, yeah?
So, I don't know if this is like right on topic, but I started at a company remotely once, and like I would log into the meetings, like team meetings or whatever it was, and I was just this person in the room, and nobody welcomed me, nobody introduced me. Like it was so awkward.
Mm-hmm.
Like never happened in any of the meetings. Like we had small team meetings with like 5 people, and like nobody would say anything. And it was just like it was strange.
Yeah.
Like not one person was like, "This is Andy. She's new to our
And they were probably all going, who's that?
Yeah. Just like staring at you on the Zoom screen. Oh my gosh.
It was just so strange.
Yeah.
I think like making sure that even in a remote setting, like you have a buddy, you have someone who's there with you and like helping to guide you through
Yeah.
those first few weeks is like really important.
How many people are hiring remotely and in multiple time zones? Yeah.
Lots.
Is that something that you feel like you're caring for? So like what maybe morning here could be like, I'm from Maryland, so like Evolve is here, I'm 2 hours ahead. So like caring for that of like, if you have people in multiple time zones, like what time do you start that day one? Who contacts them when? What are they doing in that time? And so really being conscious of not only those things, but making those things work for the people across the different places.
Anyone else want to share? It can be, what do you think? Oh yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
have the welcome committee actually be welcoming.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Yeah.
It's like a review, like reviews online. If you buy something online, super important, right? We all want to know how someone else is experiencing it. And if they had a poor experience, if they're, you said flip it and just uninterested, right? Doesn't want to be there. That's going to make me think that I also don't want to work here. Was my review of this company not accurate, right? So being excited, right? And it doesn't have to be fake. Get the right person in there who is excited and really familiar with your company, right? Gets the new hire started right. All right. Any others? I think we kind of touched on this too, but any other thoughts on? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
This is something you've experienced, but it's something that worked with. I think all of us as thinking folks should have some baseline training for what
Mm.
they're awkward to begin with. But people make it even more awkward. There's no sense of like, am I supposed to get to know this person?
Mhm.
What's tell them what to do?
Mhm.
It's kind of this expectation that you actually have to make it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really amazing point. So, like, don't just send me in there and be like, hey, introduce yourself to the new person. Like, tell me, am I their mentor or buddy? Am I just saying hello? What do you want me to get out of that? Yeah.
Because you're influencing their experience, right? They're going to remember you. You might meet a lot of people, but a new hire is going to remember the people that they meet. So, a few of the things that you also called out, right? So just being that clear information, contact for questions, right? Who's leading my training? Do I have a point of contact? Who are we putting in charge of that? Whether it's just onboarding, introducing me to where I sit, or if it's the virtual world that we're talking about, right? Making sure I have access to all the tools. But who do I ask for when I need help? How do I contact IT? Likely going to need help at some point. And yeah, the tools, right? How do we make this engaging? Using a poll feature, does anybody use Zoom? I'm assuming a lot of us do, or some type of tool like that. There's different features in there that you can use to engage where it's interactive. Even just the chat feature, right? But there's an annotate feature, getting people involved in the process. Yeah. How big are your classes? How many people are you bringing on? Making sure we're being mindful of that, right? Because 40 people is a lot different than 2 people starting, for sure. It takes a team, but also making sure that you still feel like it's an individual experience, right? You still feel like you're part of and you're welcome to your company. All right. So would love to just kind of reflect with all of you on what we've talked about, and here for just kind of general Q&A. But I think we shared a lot of stories, and those are my favorite times. That's where I get a lot of takeaways from, is just listening to what's worked well, what hasn't worked well at our companies. But any kind of general takeaways from you? Any things that we're going to go and implement within our own role, or any questions that we have for us or for each other?
Oh. Yes.
So I have a question. You guys have a lot of data in this topic. Do you have any stats that show that you apply your entire class, onboarding class, to your headquarters and training and stuff like that, or if they'll actually stay longer and just kind of training online at all times? Like, do you have any data about that?
We don't, but I've seen it done both ways. So obviously there's there's a huge monetary investment in like bringing, particularly if you're rapidly scaling, right? So if you're scaling rapidly and you've got hundreds of people starting in a year, that's probably just not the most scalable, sustainable model to fly everyone out, because you've got the getting them there, the feeding them, the making space for them in an office that you may not have that many dedicated workspaces. So now where do you put them all? Do you jam them in the room? So I don't have any data on that, but I'd say it probably is very dependent upon the organization and the organizational size and where you are. There's obvious benefits to bringing people in person, and it's I'll call it the easy way out, right? Let's just bring them all in person and then we can do what we've been doing. But like if you think of scale and then ease, so like I don't know how much time, if you have 2.5 months, you've got plenty of time. But if you've ever got to start somebody, like you've got 2 weeks, like trying to get them scheduled, flights out to your site is just a lot more difficult and could possibly feel chaotic. And I think there's ways to set up a remote onboarding plan that feels just as engaging. Obviously you can't see people in person, but like KG said, I met her in person for the first time today, but I feel like I know her pretty well. Like we've interacted a lot. So I definitely see the pluses and minuses, and maybe you do that for some roles and others not. Maybe where there's a majority of the people on site, you might want to bring people out or get them together periodically to come up with a schedule to do in person. but scalability is a little rough with that model.
And I would
Yeah.
say, for me, I love being in person, like the opportunity to go into an office, but a lot of our teammates, even if they live in Denver, which is where our office is, if I'm applying for a remote job, that's probably one of the things that I want about that job, is that it is remote, right? And I don't have to come into an office. I figured out what works best for me. So I'm sure that that's a lot of people, at least in my company, a lot of people, what they want is the flexibility to work where they want. So we don't always want to come into. There's no expectation for our teammates to come into an office. So it's about applying some of the same things that you love about being in person, right? How can we move that into a remote world? How can we engage? Right? So how do we stay in touch throughout the whole, from the application process through before they even start, and then once they start, how do we keep them engaged? How do we utilize the tools, right? How do we keep making sure that there's not 5 people on a meeting and you haven't introduced yourself, right? Making sure that you bring them into the conversation, and even if it's their day one, welcoming their voice, right? Encouraging them to speak up, I think is a huge part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
KG, one of our biggest game changers was the day we start individuals, so maybe share with the group how you thought through that
Yeah.
and how it's changed the experiences. I think it's
Yeah, I love it. They're also calling me KG. I go by KG. Sorry, within my company.
My bad.
No, all good. Just wanted to throw that out. But yeah, we put a lot of thought into how we start our team. So back when we were in office, back in 2020, we started people on a Monday, and that's a long week. You started on a Monday, your first day at a company, you have a lot to learn. You're absorbing so much information, even if it's not given to you, right? You're seeking it out. It's a lot of information. And what we learned is that we might not be delivering the information at the most intentional time, the most impactful time. So taking into consideration all the feedback, all the anecdotal conversations I've had with our teammates, and seeing what mattered to them. What was the most important part? What are the questions that they had 3 weeks in, right, that we can deliver a little bit quicker? So looking at that, right, they want to know about our values. They want to know our mission as a company. What do we do? Why are we here? How can I contribute? How can I get involved with my teammates? That's what they want to know. So we've since adjusted, and we start on Wednesdays. So a little bit shorter of a week, and we run them through a 3-hour onboarding program each day, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So they meet with me and some other teammates and get introduced to our company culture, of course get set up with our IT team, making sure they're logged into the tools, get kind of a history of our company and their place in it. We work in vacation rentals, so really talking about what that process is, how we partner with some other companies. And then they really learn how they get to meet with other teammates. We have a lot of time actually for them to connect with each other too. They're new hires. They're all starting at a new company in all different roles, getting to know each other, adding them all to a Slack channel. That's the communication tool that we use. So Slack, I add them all to a new hire Slack channel and let them ask each other questions. Let them share about each other. So it's for those first 3 days. Then the afternoon time frames, they go and spend with their specific teams. So this is all remote. We do all of it remote, not in person at all. Definitely encourage people to come into the office if they want to and they have the opportunity to, but no expectation for that to happen. So using Zoom for those first 3 hours of each day to really just share with them about why we're here, right? What is this job that you signed up for? And then the next week, they really dive into their role-specific training, but let's deliver it. All this intentional information, still a lot of information. They're still going to have questions, but they know who to ask the questions to, and they have a space to do so.
Yeah.
Yes?
I had a question about training hiring teams or hiring managers and maybe new hiring managers. And I think a question for you two or the group on how often do you train hiring teams and update them on new vetting initiatives or just ongoing changes that we're making to hire more inclusively? How often does that training occur when you train your hiring teams?
Yes. No. Yeah, so I think absolutely, for sure, train your hiring team. And I think this is one that's very timely. So I think as you, and one of the things we didn't talk about is like, we have a new employee onboarding. We also have a new leader onboarding that goes sort of above that and like what you do as a new leader. But I think introducing like the hiring process light version up front for new leaders is really important. And then having a deeper dive that's a little bit more timely. So like you're a new hire, you may or may not be hiring anybody in your first 30 days. So that might not be the best time to train you, but at some point you're going to be hiring. So having hiring manager training throughout the year that people can participate in. Like, I don't know about you, but like right now we're doing 2023 planning for the upcoming year, and there's going to be lots of hiring. So, note to self. That was my mental note. We should plan this. But note to self, we could probably look at some of that cyclical hiring as we're doing that planning and set up hiring workshops. I'm making this up. We'll talk about this. Set up hiring manager training throughout the year to align with where we're going to be doing a lot of hiring. But I think, to your point, like as you change processes, as you focus on things, it's really important to reiterate and workshop that, and not just do it in like a here's an e-learning, go through it and get educated, but like this format where people can really have discussions and ask questions and figure out like how to problem solve around things. Like, it's very different to hire in person than it is remotely. How do you interview that way? When you talk about like inclusivity, which KG can speak to, like what does that mean in the interview processes? What should you say? What should you not say? How should you document those things? And I think thinking about how you do all of that and keeping it fresh and up to date for the hiring manager. So if they're at your company for 5 years, they don't get it like the first year they start and then never get it again. Because things happen, things evolve, things change. And so keeping that fresh is really important.
Yeah. I would say we communicate all the time, right? So it might not always be a dedicated cadence of a training. If there's a large change or initiative we're working towards, absolutely we want to make sure everybody's feeling set up for success there. But just making sure we're communicating. So if it's people leaders that need to know about the change, which is our management and above, we want to communicate that. So we have a Slack channel. There's different kind of like all hands meetings that we have as well, where we want all of our company to know kind of what we're working towards. What are our goals? We want to also admit where we're falling short, right? And hear what are some of the things that our teammates want. And it might be a training, it might be resources, so hearing from them. But I don't know if we have a regular cadence training, but when things do come up, making sure that we're putting a big emphasis on that and making sure everybody's communicated to. Yeah.
I was just going to mention the people leader onboarding day that you all put together was
Yeah.
kind of game changing, like stepping them through the process of a proper way to onboard somebody, what to do on their first day,
Yeah.
etc.
Thanks for calling that out. Yep. So we also have, we've got people leaders that are hiring for evergreen positions that have their team starting, every other week. We have some teams that are not scaling as quickly and might add on a new teammate every few months. So want to make sure that they're prepared for adding a new teammate, right? Making sure that they know of any changes that have happened within our company, or just, again, getting a little refresh on how the process works. So we do have an onboarding guide dedicated for our people leaders. So if you have a direct report starting, want to make sure that you're set up for success there. So it shares them on links of like, hey, think through these things. Here's their first days, right? Who are the important people for them to meet with? Here's the first 30 days. What should we have covered within that? 60 days, 90 days, right? Create a plan. And then just sharing them. Welcome your new teammate into, if you have a company communication tool, right? Slack or email or however you're communicating, welcome them. Right? Celebrate them being there, because you worked really hard to get them there, and they also worked really hard to join your team. Right? So making sure you're celebrating that, because they are going to influence your team. They're there for a reason. So making it known is a huge part. So just kind of some of those tools along the way. But thank you for calling that out. Just providing all the resources you can for our people leaders so they're set up for success too.
Yeah. Any last other questions, thoughts, concerns? Feedback? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. That's how we like it. We want it to be engaging, interactive, and hear from all of you, because it's, that's how it's going to be influential for you. Yeah.
You should absolutely hang out with us.
Why do we get the 1 o'clock time frame?
Of course. That's where we get the real info.
Well, I'll be sticking around for a bit if anybody does have more questions.
Yeah.
But thank you all for being here. Are there any more questions before we kind of break right now?
No. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.